I'm Teisha Bader with Shalom TV's news update for Tuesday, June the 11th, 2013. The Jerusalem Post reports that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the only thing stopping him from starting peace talks with the Palestinians was their setting of preconditions. Netanyahu told the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee yesterday that he had relayed those remarks to the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who is set to return to the region soon. The Prime Minister said the Palestinians are intentionally insisting on preconditions that we cannot abide in order to prevent the start of negotiations. Further saying, as far as I'm concerned, setting preconditions is an obstacle that cannot be passed. Netanyahu further said that negotiations for peace are likely to be difficult, but that the only other choice is a binational state, which he said is not good for the state of Israel, to say the least. The Prime Minister also explained that any Palestinian state must be demilitarized and secured by the IDF, and that international forces may be present as well. He also promised that any peace treaty would be brought to the Knesset or a referendum. And addressing settlement construction, Netanyahu said that building in the settlements is ongoing and said the claim that settlement building changes Israel's ability to reach an agreement with the Palestinians is false. United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territories, Richard Falk, told reporters today that he would not step down from his position, despite calls from the U.S. to do so. Falk, who himself is Jewish, said his reputation was being smeared, that he was only doing his job, and that he wouldn't resign, despite calls for his removal over controversial remarks on terrorism, the United States, and Israeli policy. He accused his critics of calling him anti-Semitic in order to divert attention from his scrutiny on Israeli policies, and that UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had also joined in the attacks against him. As we reported to you yesterday, U.S. Representative to the UNHRC Eileen Donahoe had called for Falk's removal on Friday after he released a report on Israel's treatment of the Palestinians, where he attacked Israel's actions in Gaza and called for a special investigatory committee into Israel's treatment of Palestinian prisoners. In the same report, Falk also accused non-governmental organization UN Watch of being sponsored by the Israeli government or, quote, pro-Israel lobbying groups. Donahoe had said that Falk's statement regarding UN Watch, which is tasked with monitoring the UN by the, quote, yardstick of its own charter, threatens the independent voice of civil society at the United Nations. Late yesterday, the European Union took a stand against Falk as well, calling the report he presented on Israel in Geneva yesterday inaccurate and biased. It said the EU continues to regret the unbalanced mandate of the Special Rapporteur and is also concerned that parts of the report include political considerations. In the past, the EU emphasized that future reports should be based on a more factual and legal analysis, and we regret to see no genuine progress in that direction. The political considerations mentioned by the EU in its statement likely refer to Falk's comments about UN Watch. UN Watch drafted a resolution less than a month ago asking for Falk's removal over his recent controversial remarks regarding the Boston bombing, where Falk seemed to suggest that U.S. foreign policy was to blame for the attack, specifically naming the U.S.'s relationship with Israel. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had rejected those remarks by Falk, saying they could undermine the UN's credibility and work. A bill was passed in the Israeli Knesset today that will reserve 4 spots on the committee that appoints rabbinical judges in Israel for women. Despite opposition from the Haredi or ultra-Orthodox parties, the bill finally passed in the early morning hours in Israel today. Knesset member from the Yesh Atid party, Aliza Lavi, who is one of the architects of the bill, said 4 women on the committee for appointing rabbinical judges is the beginning of a process to rectify the discrimination against women that exists today in the rabbinical court system, adding that the variety of committee members would lead to the appointment of more moderate rabbinical judges, who are in turn more involved with the current Israeli society. Women's rights activists see the committee as a vital forum to advance women's rights, in particular in regards to the issues of marriage and divorce in Israel. The U.S. Embassy in Israel warned American citizens to avoid travel in the Golan Heights. The advisory was released Friday but mailed to American citizens living in Israel yesterday. It said U.S. citizens are advised to defer non-essential travel to and within the Golan Heights and to exercise an extra measure of caution. This due to recent heavy fighting between Syrian forces and rebel forces along Syria's border with Israel. And finally today, British singer Cliff Richard will not only be performing in Israel next month, he'll also be hitting the tennis courts to promote Israeli and Palestinian coexistence. The 72-year-old singer, who will perform at Tel Aviv's Nokia Theater July the 11th, is also a benefactor of the Freddie Krivine Foundation, which has developed coexistence tennis programs for Jewish and Arab youth throughout the country. Krivine was president of the Israel Tennis Association until his death in 2005 and used the sport to introduce Jewish and Arab children to each other. Richard said he thought that concept was a great one, and that's why he became involved in the foundation. He said it's really a lovely idea, Arab and Jewish children playing together, and they actually play doubles together and need to rely on and trust each other. It bodes well, he said, for the future. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Tuesday, June the 11th, 2013. I'm Teisha Bader.